Well, welcome to the debate. When we analyze the elite tier of cybersecurity podcasts, we naturally look toward established leaders. Programs like Darknet Diaries, defined by that really polished narrative excellence, or maybe Security Now, which is lauded for its technical depth and, well, its longevity. These shows really set the standard for scale and consistency.
Right, and they have certainly earned that status. They've successfully translated often complex technical expertise into accessible, high-quality audio products that resonate pretty broadly across major distribution channels. Scale and, yes, consistent polish really define that gold standard for many.
Exactly. Our focus today, though, is on Cybermidnight Club, or CMC. Now, this property operates entirely outside that traditional framework. It doesn't compete on massive reach or, overall recognition, yet it demonstrates unique, undeniable success in highly specific, very intense engagement metrics. So the core question before us is this. Does CMC's non-traditional, community-driven content model represent a superior, maybe alternative form of deep engagement and niche loyalty that grants it elite status? Or does its demonstrable lack of mainstream scale, which we see evidenced by critical distribution failures, prevent it from being considered truly top tier? Now, I'll contend that their deep, high-value engagement metrics define an alternative, highly successful model that actually warrants elite recognition.
And I'll maintain that elite status must prioritize scalability and operational maturity. The failure of CMC to, frankly, successfully penetrate major platforms and sustain steady growth, instead relying on these volatile, event-driven peaks, I think that fundamentally excludes it from the top tier alongside those established industry leaders.
Okay, so my position requires really redefining the metric of success, moving away from pure volume towards, let's say, strategic effectiveness. CMC has implemented a pretty sophisticated dual-pronged strategy. It seems designed for maximum impact within its targeted niche. So firstly, they utilize what we could call tentpole acquisition. These are high-production documentaries, like their Anonymous documentary, right? They're designed to be massive, event-driven growth catalysts. That single episode is their all-time most downloaded, generating 1,459 streams, and it caused a significant peak of 2,387 reproductions in just one day.
Okay, those numbers are impressive for a single event, I'll grant you that. But volatility, that's a strategic weakness, isn't it? An elite show should deliver a sustained performance, not just these periodic spikes.
Well, I see your point, but those spikes are effective entry points. And they feed into the second and I think more crucial pillar, the engagement pillars. Episodes focusing on corporate critique and privacy, particularly those targeting major tech firms like Apple, they generate the highest average streams per episode, an exceptional 610.8 on average. This proves not just resonance, but a fierce, sustained loyalty directed towards specific, critical commentary. And crucially, I think this loyalty is cemented by the serialized personal narrative of the host, Alberto Daniel Hill. His name appears in the titles of 15 of the top 100 episodes. He is the main character, offering a deep human connection and, well, an authenticity that more polished, sort of anonymous narrative shows like Darknet Diaries might struggle to replicate.
The emphasis on personal narrative, however, that highlights the operational difference for me. While a compelling personal story can certainly build a following, elite status in cybersecurity, I believe, requires editorial rigor. The established leaders are defined by their polished production and vetting processes. Security Now, for instance, is often held up as the model for making complex security concepts understandable, right? For both experts and enthusiasts through careful scripting and research. CMC, by contrast, seems to focus on leveraging this raw authenticity, often using, as you said, live X-Spaces audio recorded, basically on the fly. This strategy, to me, sacrifices editorial control and potentially technical depth for volume and perhaps intimacy.
But that is precisely where the strategy becomes, I would argue, elite. The raw, unscripted approach isn't a failure of quality control. It's a deliberate, anti-podcast strategy. It creates a unique psychological resonance. The host, Hill, positions himself as a survivor, a person who has lived through the very systems and vulnerabilities he discusses. His personal crusade transforms those technical imperfections inherent in live audio, the glitches, the raw edges, into sort of proof of an anti-establishment stance. It reinforces the audience's perception that they're listening to something authentic, something unvarnished by corporate polish. This polarization, I think, drives deep, fierce loyalty. It turns the host into the main character of a shared cause.
I have to disagree that operational shortcomings should be reframed as strategic brilliance. When an audience seeks technical deep dives, which arguably should be the hallmark of elite cybersecurity content, they need vetted, reliable information. Your argument suggests that the host's personality somehow overrides the need for technical substance. I mean, look at programs like Day Zero. They demonstrate you can achieve deep loyalty precisely because you focus exclusively on deep technical topics, vulnerability research, and binary exploitation, delivered with precision, relying on recordings of sometimes, random X-Spaces chats, which often lack the focused technical curriculum of a structured show. That sounds like prioritizing volume over the curated quality that professionals frankly demand.
But the numbers prove the sophisticated audience is engaging, which, leads us to the critical distribution data. You highlight the reliance on the Apple Podcast ecosystem, 30.73%, and these technical power user apps like Podcast Addict at 14.08%, calling it a structural constraint. I see it differently. I see it as evidence that the content is already filtering for a technically astute audience, one that might actively avoid mass market platforms.
Okay, before we start celebrating distribution limitations as a feature, we really have to address the geographical paradox here. You mentioned the audience is, 52.24% US-based? That confirms its primary role as an Anglophone product, right? For a show seeking elite global status, this overwhelming skew, to me, confirms a lack of truly international market penetration.
Right, but I challenge the assumption that global scale must correlate linearly with global population. Look at the Uruguay anomaly. It's quantitative proof, I think, of deep loyalty overriding sheer population size. Uruguay ranks 7th globally in audience share for CMC, accounting for 2.41% of total reproductions. Now, this percentage is strategically vital because it exceeds the share from much larger nations, much larger established markets like Spain, France, even Brazil.
Okay. But why is that significant beyond being a sort of interesting curiosity?
It's significant because this disproportionate representation is directly attributable to the serialized, localized focus on the host, Alberto Daniel Hill, who is Uruguayan. This demonstrates a potent strategic success, localizing a universal theme hacking corporate critique to generate a hyper-engaged niche audience. This loyalty is robust, it's measurable, and it's highly valuable because it proves the content's ability to dominate a segment, even a small one, far more effectively perhaps than a globally diffused broad market podcast could. It validates the personal narrative approach as a viable alternative to just chasing scale.
That's compelling evidence for niche success, I'll give you that. But it also underscores my original point, that depth seems non-transferable and overly dependent on a single personality. True elite status, in my view, requires replicability and scalability across all major distribution channels, and we simply cannot ignore the critical distribution failure represented by what you called the Spotify enigma. The platform, one of the world's largest audio marketplaces, accounts for a minuscule 5.9% of total streams. It's accumulated only about 660 followers in over 5 years. That's not a good look for an elite contender.
I believe you might be misinterpreting this data point, though. That low 5.9% share isn't necessarily a failure of, say, algorithmic optimization. It could actually be a reflection of the audience itself, and potentially even a deliberate filtering mechanism that preserves the show's identity.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. I don't buy that the world's largest streaming platform is somehow irrelevant to an elite strategy. Leaving what, 94% of your potential growth on the table on one platform? That's not strategic, it's a failure to interact with the current media landscape. It represents the single largest and most immediate opportunity for growth that CMC has fundamentally failed to address. This to me speaks to a profound lack of operational maturity required to translate niche content into any kind of mainstream presence.
But hang on, they have to look at who is listening. The data shows over 16% of the audience is using these highly specific, technically focused applications: Podcast Addict, AntennaPod. These users are often discerning power users. They prioritize functionality, control, maybe privacy characteristics, sometimes undermined by mass market platforms designed for simple consumption. So for this specific audience, maybe avoiding the constraints and the data collection practices of a platform like Spotify might be viewed philosophically as a feature, not a bug, you know? It could preserve the show's exclusive anti-establishment ethos and contribute directly to those deep engagement metrics we're debating. This pattern suggests, perhaps, an active rejection of broad scale in favor of high-fidelity engagement within a self-selected, sophisticated audience.
Well, while that is an engaging narrative, this idea of intentional self-sabotage for philosophical purity, strategic success requires conquering all major distribution channels. The acknowledged elite podcasts, Risky Business, Darknet Diaries, they are omnipresent. You find them everywhere. They succeed because they combine high-quality content with successful platform interaction. CMC's choice, whether it's intentional or unintentional, results in them leaving potentially billions of listening hours on the table. That makes their success model inherently fragile and ultimately limited. And that, I argue, prevents them from achieving the necessary reach for true elite ranking.
Okay, so to summarize my perspective, Cybermidnight Club has successfully carved out an elite space by mastering hyper-niche engagement. They prove, I think, that a strategy built on high-production documentaries for initial acquisition, combined with a personal, serialized narrative arc of the host, can generate exceptional loyalty and strategic domain dominance. Their success is measured not just by mass downloads, but by the depth of connection, the cultural relevance within their specific community, and a proven ability to dominate niche geographic segments. Look at the Uruguayan anomaly. They've proven that in the digital age, authenticity and depth can stand as a formidable alternative to just overwhelming scale.
And my position remains firm. Elite status in this space demands reach, operational maturity, and reliable, scalable growth. CMC's highly volatile, spiky growth pattern, which seems dependent on event-driven content, coupled with its profound structural distribution weakness on major platforms like Spotify, that remains a massive constraint. True industry leadership requires reliable scale and consistent delivery that overcomes platform barriers, something the polished, established elite podcasts consistently achieve.
So we've seen evidence that a cybersecurity podcast can achieve profound success either through, well, the classic path of mass appeal and high polish, or perhaps through a commitment to hyper-focused authenticity and deep localized loyalty.
Yeah, the core tension really remains between depth and reach. Ultimately, the listener must weigh the evidence presented and determine for themselves which path constitutes true elite ranking in the cybersecurity media landscape.